into the direct digression of this superhuman race produced from stellar materials. The Adam and Eve drama of biblical stories combine this event as the fall from God's grace and removal from the Garden of Eden with other earthly events, including the Dracon infiltration of around 1 million years ago. The stories became a depiction of multi-level events from various time periods woven together into a symbolic event portraying of the story.
It seems linking the mysterious and secretive Templars with the greatest icon in Christendom was the ultimate medieval fantasy.
The trouble is it takes on a life of its own, goes on, and then people start to believe it, but it's fantasy.
This was done in relation to the biblical flood and Noah also. The consciousness of the beings who were blown apart in Taurus fall also fell in human universe number 1. They became ripped from their race's morphogenetic field at Taurus core and disengaged from other original soul matrices. Once on Earth, with the help of the Syrian Council, this group of Tyrannosaurians transmuted their bodies from forms into pure energy and merged into a Gestalt energy field of consciousness, which served as a morphogenetic field for the 12-stranded DNA Tyrannosaurian race prototypes. Also contained within this morphogenetic field were the chelonics, time codes, electronal frequency patterns of the pre-cataclysmic time-space coordinates of Tara, which allowed Tara to reassemble the lost portions of the grid into a fabric of time with the assistance of the Rock Confederacy. The Gestalt of consciousness, genetic and planetary morphogenetic field was entered into the remaining morphogenetic field of Earth through the 11th and 14th dimension. The morphogenetic field of consciousness energetically took on a shape of a sphere, and it was called the Sphere of Amenti. Being constantly engaged in war is the very nature of the beast, in addition to lying and manipulating and deceiving everyone about everything. For instance, here is the true definition of the Ark of the Covenant. It is a portal bridge between the Sphere of Amenti in the Andromeda Galaxy and the Earth's D-2 core. Was constructed by the Guardian organization about 840,000 years ago. This intergalactic bridge was called the Ark of the Covenant of Palador, and later became known as the Ark of the Covenant. Through the Ark of the Covenant, the race souls of the Sphere of Amenti could once again be seated on Earth. Souls of the Sphere of Amenti would pass through the Ark Bridge as pure consciousness. It merges with the Earth's morphogenetic field in D-2, then birth into physical manifestation. A fifth-dimensional security seal was placed upon the Ark of the Covenant, which meant that this portal operated as a one-way door, so of the races could descend through the passageway, but could not return to the Amenti morphogenetic field for the ascension unless they had fifth-dimensional coding in their gene structure.
The only territory in the Holy Land now held by the Knights Templar was Ruad, an island less than half a mile across.
Imagine having held all of that, the coastline that we can see, having been in the city of Tortosa, the cathedral, Crac de Chevalier, Chastel Rouge, Chastel Blanc, all those great structures in those networks of castles across the hinterland, and having lost them all, having been reduced to possessing an island only slightly larger than the dimensions of the city of Tortosa.
But in 1302, things went from bad to worse for the Knights Templar. A Muslim force got wind of their garrison on Ruad, threatening the mainland. They launched an amphibious attack.
The Syrians and Pleiadians are responsible for the souls on Earth. It is only races number 2 and 6 that can pass directly to fifth-dimensional Dara if they have not been victimized by the erroneous information taught by the religions of Earth. If so, then the host must go through the halls of judgment, or if one is an interbred victim. If these beings cannot pass through the halls of Amenti and be well the subjects of being maintained on the wheel of births and deaths, they cannot graduate into the freedom of being off the wheel of karma. Ever since Lucifer set up the Templars 200,000 years ago, they have been about making war. Peace and loving of the beautiful females is not their thing. Western civilization is Zionist, and like these Iberus on Nibiru, they are a patriarchal society, and the men prefer having sex with one another in Western devilization, with these fantastically beautiful women available. They are perverted, and this perversity has caused them to be kicked out of various nations.
The fortress was constructed and manned by the Hospitallers, partners and rivals of the Templars. Its location is crucial. It defends the most important trade route in the region.
Over there, you have the long valley with the main road. It's a main road today, and it was a main road in medieval time, linking the coast to the inland cities, which in the Crusader period were the centers of Islamic power, and the coast was the center of the Crusader power.
The Hospitallers and the Templars joined forces to defend this important territory. This was a massive military operation, and David Nicole is on a quest to find out how the Knights operated. Horses were essential to the holy warriors, but stabling the animals was a major undertaking.
First of two stables. This one is the smaller of the two. Still pretty big.
These magnificent vaulted buildings could stable up to 1,000 horses. From here, they could be out and in battle in minutes.
They are quite literally chomping at the bit. They're probably as eager as the men who are going to ride them to get out there and get into action.
Horses were also essential to transport weapons, food, and men around the castle. The designers of Crac de Chevalier had to find a way of allowing the animals to move around the steep inclines of the fortress. They solved the problem by constructing the passages as long, shallow steps instead of slopes.
By having these relatively shallow steps, it reduces the slope, which makes it easier for the animals. And of course, it gets wet, it gets slippery, and if you've got that many animals, you're going to have an awful lot of animal dung.
Moving men about the castle was just as important, especially when under attack.
We're deep inside this really, really thick, solid piece of masonry.
This is known as a gallery wall, a secret passage within the broad fortifications, allowing the knights to move clandestinely around the castle in times of attack.
They'd like to keep it as hidden as possible from the enemy. Imagine yourself being under attack, people racing backwards and forwards with new arrows for the crossbowmen, or bringing water or food to them, or help to the injured. There's going to be a lot of activity going on during a siege.
Knights would be manning not only the arrow slits, but an ingenious piece of high-tech medieval engineering known as machicolations. Machicolations protrude from the castle walls. They are a cunning anti-tunneling measure.
If you could get above them and then drop rocks or indeed anything nasty on top of them, boiling water, forget the boiling oil, that's far, far too expensive to waste. But I think some boiling water on top of the enemy miners' heads could be quite effective. That put them off.
But the greatest example of military engineering.
But here's the deal. They're going to want you to believe that these white people built these castles, but they didn't. The Moors built these castles. After the Moors left France and they left Spain and all the places up in Europe that they were at, if you can see this pyramid slope in there, look at it. You can see the slope. You can see the pyramid slope. So even all this masonry work right here was done by the Africans who went up into Europe. And the reason why there's moats and everything built around there is because, again, they had to find a way to keep the barbaric ass Europeans from running up and... See, the Moors, they ran Spain for a long time. They educated white people up in Spain. They educated those white people to become the monarchs that they became. And that's the reason why there's a lot of stuff that don't get said, but there was a big double cross between Moors and Spain, and the whole ideal of all this land in America is being taken the way it was taken is like the same double cross that you see right now with the United States government merging with all these foreign governments coming in here by force to perpetuate their freaking policies, you know, implement however they feel about whatever. And that means that you homeowners here in America, when the banks sell out and they are the overall controller of the assets of that house you live in, once the bankers move out and the American dollar has collapsed, that means by default your house is no longer yours, because that contract you have with the bank is no good anymore because the bank folded, which means that whoever supplied the bank the money that it needed to get going, which in this case is the freaking Zionists, who owns your Federal Reserve Bank, who owns this country, who owns Britain, who owns the Vatican, who damn near owns but don't own because they're criminals. So they are extorting, racketeering, and gangstering everything on the planet for themselves. So they are professional, ungodly criminals that has victimized everyone on the planet through deception, deprivation, deceitfulness, and flat-out dogma from religious propagandas. All this stuff that is going on right now, you can still see in antiquity and stone the need that people were finding back in the day to build structures that was protected from the invading barbarian people that today are still pissing God.